Alright, not the tightest ever, but it should work. I got a couple more metal wedges that I'm going to drive into that just for good measure. Hang on a second. Hey, it's Greg here with MaritimeGardening.com, and I thought I'd do something kind of fun today. I was at a Army Navy surplus store the other day and I saw this thing. It's like a, I guess a hand pickaxe. You could put it in a backpack sort of thing, and it just goes together like that, and off to the races you can dig a foxhole, I suppose. I'm not planning to dig any foxholes anytime soon, but I just looked at the weight of this and I thought it might be useful as a gardening tool. You've seen me in my garden using this thing, which is, you know, considerably larger head, right? And you've seen me using this thing, and you see me using this thing. This is a hand tool. And so I see this tool is sort of being in between, right? In between this and this. And this is a great tool for breaking ground, but it's exhausting to use, right? I mean, if I had to have only one tool, let's say I was gonna, you know, escape into the wilderness with a bug-out bag, and I'd bring one thing with me and a bag of seeds, it would be this. Really, I find it that useful. If I could bring two things, it would be this and maybe a shovel, or this and maybe a heavy pickaxe. So on and so forth, right? The more tools you have, the more options you have. Good Lord, there's actually black flies out this morning, and they're everywhere. I thought I was early enough. It is October 14th, and there's black flies everywhere. This is ridiculous. Anyway, so bearing all that in mind, I think this is a useful tool, but the handle's too short to be of any use. You know, to have a light handle with a light tool isn't so bad. Most of what you're doing is this, right? So you're using this part of your arm, this muscle. It's not too hard on that part of your arm. But for something like this, with this kind of weight, you're doing this over and over again. Especially, I've got a bit of tennis elbow in both my forearms, which is embarrassing. But anyway, it makes using a tool with a heavy head like this kind of, you can only do it for so long, and then the fatigue sets in. So I thought, why not put a handle on this thing? Put a long handle on it so I can stand up. It's still got good weight, right? So it's got good weight. So it would be good for standing up if I had a bed with a few, you know, this time of year, fall, is when it's the only time of year I weed my beds, really. Because, you know, some of them, you'll get clumps of this and that and the other thing, and I just basically pull them out and turn them upside down and leave them there to rot over the course of the winter. So I don't spend a lot of time weeding, but this is the time of year I do it. And I thought maybe a tool like this with a little bit of weight attached to a proper handle, not this useless little thing, might be the way to go. So I thought I would take you through putting a longer handle on this thing today. And I mean, there's lots of YouTube videos of people showing how to hang handles on things, but they tend to come at it from a perfectionist point of view. The perfect wood and perfectly fitting it to the thing. And this one I'm going to do today is coming at it from an extremely pragmatic point of view. How fast can we get this done? I honestly think if I wasn't filming a video, I could probably slap one of these onto a handle in about 10 minutes and make something functional. This is going to take a bit longer because I'm walking through the process, and there's these bloody flies. But I thought I would take you through that process. So come along and let's first find some. Oh, and the other thing is, I'm going to use a spruce, which is a wood no one would ever use to attach a handle to a pickaxe. But again, I'm not doing like huge swings like this. I'm not trying to break rocks, and I'm not going to be prying up. Right, I'm using this mainly as a tool for just loosening the soil around weeds and light things like that. So really, the whole point of the tool is to just, you know, use it very lightly, but not to have to get on my hands and knees, to just be able to stand up and use it. So I just need a handle that's strong enough for that. And I think spruce will probably do the job, because I use it for all my shovel handles, and You know, I'm not prying up 300-pound rocks with them, but I use them fairly aggressively, and I find if you linseed oil it, it'll last 5 or 6 or even more years if you're really careful. So let's take a walk in the woods and see if we can find a handle for this thing. Alright, so here we are in the woods behind the house, and there's lots of possible candidates as trees here, but what I'm looking for is a dead standing spruce tree that is the right diameter for the head of that pickaxe. And most of the trees here are either not dead or they're too dead. Why spruce, you might ask? Well, because I've got it. That's what's around. There's going to be people saying, you can't use spruce, the grain is wrong, this is wrong, that's wrong, da 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 da. That's just what experts say, man. It's my opinion. You can use spruce for a handle for something like it. You know, it's not it's probably not the worst handle you could make, but certainly not the best handle you can make, and not the worst. It's somewhere in between. And for me, if I can do it quickly and it costs nothing, and I don't really have to go far, I mean, literally my garden's over there, so I'm not going far afield for this. And also because it's dead standing, spruce is kind of unique in woods. A lot of hardwood trees, when they die outside in the wilderness, and they just die standing, they rot. Spruce is kind of unique in the sense that it'll die and stay standing and dry out, and it'll take a long time for it to rot. So you can find a piece of wood that is straight, that is not rotten, if you're looking for spruce. So it's handy in that sense. And I use it for handles for shovels and rakes and stuff like that all the time, and it works out fine. And yeah, it's not the best they don't sell it in the stores because it's not the best wood, but it's totally fine. And it's easy to work with, and it's ubiquitous. I have it everywhere here. So I'm not really seeing most of these trees. They look dead, but if you look up at the tops, there's still a bit of green, right? So the wood hasn't dried out. You want the dead standing ones because they've dried out, right? Then it's not going to shrink, or it's not going to shrink that much, right? It's really not going to shrink once you start, once you use it. So it's actually quite dense back here, and certainly hard to walk around with a camera tripod, and even harder to do it without falling down. So, anyway, I'm just walking around trying to locate a tree that has the right properties. It's not that you can use just any tree when you're trying to source materials in the woods. It might be one in every 20, one in every 30, one in every 50 tree. It's worth your while to walk around and look around a bit to find just the right thing that has just the right qualities that will save you work, right? You don't want to work any harder than you have to, and it's worth looking around a bit. And actually, I think I see just the right tree over here. Can I get to it without falling down is the question. Or without dropping the camera. Alright. This guy right here seems to have the right. It's not the straightest tree, but it's fairly straight. And it's dead. But let me show you. I'll come on up from this other side here. Oh, good God. I gotta cut it down and have a look at it, but if you look up the tree, you can see that it still got some of those finer sticks. So when a tree is really dead, all that fine stuff just rots and falls off. Looking at this one, I can sort of tell. I'm gonna have to cut into it to see for sure. But it's dead, but it hasn't been dead that long. And I think it's just right. I can tell it feels very light. Look at the end grain here. You can tell it's, at least I can tell anyway by the color of it, it's dry, right? This is basically like the closest thing to kiln dried lumber you can find in the woods, and it's pretty straight. Right, this section I got here looks good to me. So I'm going to cut it off over here. It starts to bend again, right there. There we go. All right, I think we got something we can work with here. Okay, here we are back at the beginning, and we've got our piece of wood. And while I'm working on this, I'm actually going to leave this a bit long, just because it's easier to handle. I can tell by looking at it that it bends right around here. And that's about all the length I need anyway, so I'm just going to make a mark here so I know that I don't really need to work above this. This is too thick anyway. So, just so I know. Alright, so what tools have I got to work on this here? I've got a knife. This is like what a lot of people might call like a survival knife, I guess. I wouldn't define it as such, but anyway, I got it at a yard sale. Actually, spruce handle. I got a finer knife. This is the sort of thing I would take in the woods with me, because it's good for doing things that I would use a knife for, carving, you know, cleaning fish and stuff like that. Finer things. I got an axe, hand axe. I got a saw. And I got a rasp, which is a really handy tool. Not essential, but can save you a lot of work. So this one here is, the handle of this is shaped in such a way that the head can travel the whole distance of the handle. Right, so it would be a lot of work to take this and carve it down so I could do that. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to shape this in such a way that it's easy to hang on to, makes a good handle, and then just the last couple inches I'm going to make to accommodate the head, and I'm going to use a kind of wedge to make it fit properly. You'll see what I mean as I go, and if you know anything about hanging axe heads, you kind of know where I'm going with this already. Anyway, step one, before I can work this piece of wood, is to remove all the sort of knots where the stems are. You just use your axe for that. Right, you notice I'm holding the axe really close to the head. It's just easier. This is more about, you're not using a lot of strength or energy to do this. You're more trying to be very precise, and you're trying to keep your keep your legs in such a position that you're not going to cut a major artery. That would not be good. So that's the general idea. Okay, that's pretty much that. Now I'm going to take this knife and sort of work that bark off. There's different ways to go about, skinning a log, and a draw knife is a better tool. There's all kinds of tools that are better than this. I'm just doing this to use basic tools to show. You could do this with an axe as well. It actually works quite well, but I find something like this is more precise. I should be wearing a glove on this hand. Should be wearing a glove on both hands. And also you could wrap something around this. If you go slow and you're careful, you should be okay. Now, and I say this as a person who injures his hands all the time. So take my advice with a grain of salt. If you go slow and you're very methodical, you should be okay. If you do it wrong, you'll cut a finger off. That's basically it. The sharper your knife is, the easier this is to do in general. Just safer. Sharp knives are safe knives. And I've done videos where I've made different kinds of improvised vices. And if you can, maybe I'll put a link to one of those at the end of this. That's probably the best thing to do. Today I didn't want to devote a lot of time to this. I wanted to do this fairly quickly. I don't want to mess around with all that stuff. So I'm doing it in the most unsafe way You could. This is so dense here that it's actually easier to use the axe a little bit. So again, we're not striving for perfection here, but you can see how I'm going to throw away this part of it, just by having this left on, it makes the thing a bit heavier and easier to work with and gives you something to grab onto. You might be able to tell that down here where the handle is, I left it kind of round, and as we go up, I've made it beefier this way, but thinner this way, right? And that's just so it's going to make it easier to accept this head, right? And I'm basically, you know, when you're swinging it, it's a one-dimensional sort of tool, so you need a one-dimensional handle. So it needs to have more beef this way than this way, sort of thing, right? So that's why I'm doing that. You don't want you don't want the handle to be too bigger than it needs to be, but you also don't want it to be smaller than it needs to be. But you'll notice that I'm going a lot beefier than the hardwood one that it came with, right? Because I'm not using hardwood, I'm using an inferior wood. So you just make it a little thicker. And of course you have to be a little more careful with it too. Now, you'll notice that I got a lot of splinters and a lot of sort of rubbish hanging off of this. And I'm just trying to rough this out to use it very, get this ready to be used today. But it's certainly not done today. What I like to do for something like this, like just a quick ready-made tool, is to just slap it together and get it on, make sure it works. And then I can adjust it over time. All this little rubbish sticking off the sides, I find a really easy way to deal with it is this is my fire pit here. You make a campfire and you just run the handle through the fire and it'll singe off all those little, you can see it here if you look closely, these sort of furry bits, right? The fire will singe those off. You just run it through the fire, then you rub it over a rock like that. I mean, there's all kinds of tools you can use to do that, but I find that works great. And that helps dry it out a bit more and it makes it a bit darker, so there's a certain natural preservatives that get into wood just from fire smoke. And then, in the winter when I'm not using pickaxes anymore, I treat this with some linseed oil. So I'm not going to treat this with anything today. It's fairly dry. This is dry wood. This is like something that came out of a mill, really. Or it's not 100% dry, of course. Someone's going to argue with me. But for wood I found in the woods, it's very, very, very dry. But in the winter, what I'll do is I'll take it in, put it in my shed, and then maybe around Christmas vacation, I'll treat it with some linseed oil. Just leave it like that all winter, and I should have a good tool that lasts multiple years as long as I don't go crazy prying up on it and stuff. So now what I'm going to do is cut it off here. I think this is the sort of functional length I want. I guess what would that be? Navel height, just above my navel, is where I want it to be. That seems to be, this pickaxe comes up basically to my, I guess, crotch. And I find it a bit short. So I find most tools are about, for me, I'm 6'4", they're like 6 inches too short, generally speaking. So I'm going to bring this up, look at the difference here. I'm going to bring this up considerably higher. almost a foot higher actually. And I think it'll just be easier for me to use. Let's lop this off. Alright, so the next step is to get this head just the way I want it. So what I'm going to do is position this pretty much the way I want it. I mean, we're doing everything by eye here. I'm going to take this marker and mark off how much I need to reduce. And you got to bear in mind the marker is not perfectly matching it, so what am I trying to say? The circle I made using the marker is slightly small relative to the space I need, so I'm going to carve this down so that it's outside the ink and then sort of adjust it as I go. But that's a good rough guide. And I want to leave a little bit of spare space. I don't want to do any more work here than I have to. So I'll make my mark, take it down to here. Now if I screw up, I can always just make it a bit shorter. But you can tell we haven't got a lot of material to remove, right? Not a whole lot. So now I'm going to actually switch to a smaller knife. I haven't got much to take off, and I just find it easier to carve with something like this. And you can use for a lot of this what's called a push cut, where you're sort of using your thumb to push with your thumb. But you can, it's a good way to get it started. Just going to work my way around real quick. Actually, I don't need the push cut with this, so use it if you need it. Oop, don't want to go too much there. It's actually going really quick. You do it quick with a knife, and then if you have one, you can do this whole thing with a knife. But the rasp is a great tool for sort of finer adjustments. Notice how I just keep checking. You can see a bit of a high point right there. Now take that down. There's a knot there that just doesn't want to go. Use an axe there for that. A little better now. Let's have a look. Well, it's a start. Certainly not all the way there yet. Yeah, getting close. All right, we need to take off a bit more material down below. Bit more down below here. Alright, now it seems like I've taken off more than I should have. Of course. Now you can't see it right now, but off camera I'm pounding this on a stump. I'm holding it straight up and down. I'm pounding the bottom of the handle against the stump. And what that's doing is it's setting the head further and further down, and basically at the point where the head stops going down, it'll leave a mark, and I can sort of tell where it's reasonably tight around the collar. Alright, so now I've got it where I basically got it as good as I can get it for my skill level. You can see there's a huge space around the wood at the top, and that's because we're hanging it the wrong way. And now I'll show you how we're going to deal with that. I'm going to make a mark here about 1/4 inch above the top and cut that off. Okay, now using my saw, so I'm going to cut this off. And I'm going to save this piece because I'm going to use it as a wedge. So I'm just going to take that piece of wood and I could use for that handle. Make something resembling a wedge out of it. Get another one just in case. And I know there's someone watching this right now saying I'm using the wrong material to make my wedge, and you know, probably saying I'm doing everything wrong. But for me, if it's expedient, that's all you need. Here, a bit of a wedge, right? Fashion another one here. Alright, that's pretty good. We got wedges, we got a little bit of glue here. Now what I gotta do is cut. I gotta at the end of this I gotta cut a space for the wedge to fit into, which is harder than you might think, especially if you're doing it freehand like this. And you know, I could do this all in my shop with a vise and everything like that, but I just do it out here using almost nothing. Just to simulate the situation a lot of people might be in. I'm not forcing this here, I'm just letting the saw do the work. Trying to keep it straight as I can. I gotta make this cut at least as deep as the wedge, right? That'll do it. All right. Not the straightest cut in the world, but close enough. All right. A little bit of glue on the hole, and we just work her in. Work the wedge in. There we go. Very gently with a piece of wood like this. There was a little space near the front of the where I'm pounding it. I put a wedge in, so there was a space between the handle and the head. So rather than just leave that space void, I just jammed a little wedge in there as well. Certainly not, professional work. But at this point, you're completely committed, so you basically want to fill every little space there is with slivers of little wedges and stuff. Alright, not the tightest ever, but it should work. I got a couple more metal wedges that I'm going to drive into that just for good measure. Hang on a second. Alright, so I'm going to do something a bit avant-garde here, but I've got just a piece of copper pipe that I pounded flattened and just sort of, I guess, cold forged it, which isn't hard to do with copper, and having a bit of a wedge shape at the end. Ran over with a file a couple times. That's a wedge. Really, I should have added some stuff to the back to make it wider at the back, but anyway, it should function as I need it here. I just want to give this a little bit more, width at the top, I guess. And luckily, spruce is a soft enough wood where I can get away with doing something like this. Good enough. Alright, so that's what we got. Not perfect, but certainly functional. Not the most beautiful handle in the world, but this is the sort of thing, when I'm sitting around having a beer, I whittle these things down a bit. One thing I would do to complete this would be to just, what they call chamfer the butt end. It just means you're sort of cutting off some of the material. You're cutting it on an angle at the bottom. Just that last little bit. And that tends to keep it from fraying out too much. Again, this is one of these things, if you're not holding your knife correctly, you can injure yourself pretty bad. And when it comes to knife injuries, experience is a great teacher, but I'm sure I'm not doing everything perfect. I'm sure there's going to be people criticizing some aspect of this. Just removing whatever wants to flake away, basically. No, I mean, the rest of this would be just something you'd work on over time, just gradually perfecting it. But in terms of a rough and ready garden tool, this is pretty much ready to go. Kind of hard to stop once you get started, to tell you the truth. All right, let's go give it a try. All right, so here's a fairly weedy part of the garden that I just let go. I had garlic growing here. When I pulled the garlic, I just didn't do anything since the garlic was pulled. So, yeah, gotta say it's a pleasant tool to use. A lot easier to use than a pickaxe. You can pry a bit with it. Get under the weeds, no problem. Yeah, I gotta say this is a nice two-hander. Very light, but good, at the same time a good weight for getting at things. You can get underneath the weeds. Let's see what we got here. One tenacious fella. That was a knot in the way, that was a problem. Anyway, yeah, totally happy with that. Works great for what I want it for. We'll see how well it stays on. Anyway, a bit of a slapdash video there, and I don't know if I did a good job of staying in my camera angles properly, so apologies for that. Hope it gave you a sense of what goes into slapping together a quick handle for a tool like this. There's lots of different ways to do it. This is probably the laziest and least effective method, but it takes the least amount of time. And for what I'm using it for, I think it'll be fine. Again, I'm not breaking rocks. I'm working in a coal mine here. I'm basically using it as a kind of soil loosener. And I gotta say, this sort of like quarter weight pickaxe is a nice little tool on a long handle like this. It's very pleasant to use, and I think it'll save me a lot of back strain going forward. So I hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please like, share, subscribe. Check out my podcast, maritimegardening.com. Until next time, get out there, get at it, have fun in your garden. Thanks for watching.